It was supposed to be the future of naval aviation. A sleek, stealthy aircraft capable of penetrating deep into enemy territory, delivering precision strikes, and returning undetected. The A-12 Avenger II, born out of the Cold War tensions and the need for a new generation of strike aircraft, promised to be a game-changer for the United States Navy and Marine Corps. But fate had other plans. Despite years of development, billions of dollars in funding, and the dedication of some of the most talented engineers and designers of the time, the A-12 Avenger II never made it to production. Its cancellation in 1991, after a series of technical, financial, and political setbacks, remains one of the most controversial decisions in the history of military aviation. Yet, the story of the A-12 Avenger II is not just one of failure and disappointment. It's also a story of innovation, perseverance, and the human spirit of exploration and discovery. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the rise and fall of the A-12 Avenger II, exploring the technical and strategic challenges that shaped its development, the personalities and decisions that influenced its fate, and the lessons that we can learn from its legacy. Here's what you need to know. In the years that followed, the U.S. government and the contractors of the A-12 Avenger II, McDonnell Douglas, and General Dynamics, would experience numerous lawsuits over breach of contract, ultimately together to the Supreme Court. In October of 1983, the world's first operational stealth aircraft took to the skies under cover of both physical and metaphorical darkness. This new jet, dubbed the F-117 Nighthawk, would revolutionize America's approach to air warfare, pivoting away from the higher and faster mantra that had dominated much of the Cold War, and toward the doctrine of stealth. As of its introduction in 1983, being sneaky became more important than being powerful in military aviation. While this technical frontier was first explored by the U.S. Air Force, by the time the Nighthawk was on duty prowling the sky, the U.S. Navy wanted a stealth platform all their own. Eventually, Lockheed would pitch the idea of a significantly more capable F-117N Seahawk, based on their first-of-its-kind Nighthawk. But the Seahawk wasn't the Navy's first pass at a carrier-capable stealth attack aircraft. 10 years before the Seahawk proposal would reach Navy desks, the Navy was already getting started on their Advanced Tactical Aircraft program. The ATA initially sought to replace the Grumman A-6 Intruder by the mid-1990s. The Intruder had been in service for the U.S. Navy as a ground attack platform since 1963, and the Navy saw a replacement program as the perfect opportunity to get into the stealth game. On 13 January 1988, a joint team from McDonnell Douglas and General Dynamics was awarded a development contract for what was to become the A-12 Avenger II, not to be confused with Lockheed's proposed A-12 of the 1960s, which sought to arm an State Route 71 sibling jet with air-to-air weapon systems. Once completed, the Navy's A-12 would have been a flying wing design reminiscent of Northrop Grumman's B-2 Spirit or forthcoming B-21 Raider, though much smaller. A new aircraft for a new approach to air warfare. Intended to serve aboard carriers, the A-12 Avenger II was to be slightly more than 37 feet long, with a wingspan of a few inches more than 70 feet. These dimensions would have made the A-12 significantly shorter than the nearly 55-foot-long Intruder, while boasting a far wider wingspan that extended just far enough to allow two A-12s to sit side by side on adjacent catapults on a carrier flight deck. In fact, the A-12's wingspan would have even dwarfed the F-14 Tomcat's extended sweep wings by a good 6 feet. Although the A-12 Avenger II utilized a flying wing design, its overall shape differed from the triangular B-2 Spirit under development for the Air Force. The sharp triangular shape of the A-12 eventually earned it the nickname, the Flying Dorito. Despite the width of the A-12 Avenger II, however, the aircraft itself was only meant to carry a comparatively small 5,150 pounds of internal ordnance, which would outperform the Nighthawk's paltry payload of just two 2,000-pound GBU-27 laser-guided bombs, but was nowhere near the 18,000 pounds offered by the Intruder. However, like modern stealth aircraft in operation today, the A-12 Avenger was never intended to scream into the fight with its teeth bared. In the minds of many defense officials, its ability to strike targets without warning in highly contested airspace was more useful than a massive payload. In yet another example of how military aviation was rapidly changing throughout the Cold War, blanketing an area with munitions was no longer considered the most effective means of engaging the enemy. Instead, stealth combined with highly accurate precision munitions would allow the A-12 Avenger II to surgically strike enemy targets where it hurt most. Despite clearly serving in an attack capacity, Lockheed's F-117 Nighthawk had been given the F designator intentionally. The F-117 possessed no air-to-air capability whatsoever, a defining characteristic for a fighter aircraft, but Air Force officials hoped the concept of a stealth fighter would attract the sort of highly skilled fighter jocks this new attack aircraft would really need. The Navy entertained no such chicanery in their own stealth jet, planning to saddle their new platform with an A prefix to demonstrate its use against ground targets, despite actually having the ability to engage air targets with its two internally stored AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles. In other words, the A-12 Avenger II would have actually been America's first stealth fighter. However, the A-12 wouldn't have been well suited for fighting the powerful and acrobatic fourth-generation fighters being fielded by national opponents like the Soviet Union and post-collapse Russia at the time. With a top speed of just 580 miles per hour and a service ceiling of 40,000 feet, this subsonic aircraft may have been armed with the missiles it would need to take down an enemy jet, but logic would dictate that it rely on stealth, rather than firepower, if enemy fighters were in the area. Aside from its two air-to-air missiles, the A-12 Avenger II was also intended to carry two AGM-88 HARM air-to-ground missiles that had entered service in 1985. The AGM-88 was an anti-radiation missile, meaning it could home in on the electromagnetic waves emanating from early warning radar arrays and surface-to-air missile platforms. In other words, the A-12 Avenger II would have been able to serve in a similar capacity to today's F-35 Joint Strike Fighters in contested airspace. The A-12 would hunt down air defense systems and eliminate them to clear the way for less stealthy and more weapon-laden platforms that could follow. When not on the hunt for enemy radar, the AGM-88 HARM missiles could be swapped out in favor of unguided or precision bombs for continued action against ground targets. At one point, the Navy had plans to purchase 620 A-12 Avenger IIs, with the Marine Corps ordering another 238, and even the Air Force mulling over an order of 400 modified A-12 variants to replace their outgoing F-111 aardvarks. It's important to note that only 59 operational F-117A Nighthawks were ever built, so the A-12 Avenger II promised to become America's premier stealth aircraft for years to come, with a total of 1,258 aircraft in American stables. If all of these orders had been filled, the A-12 Avenger II would have become one of America's most plentiful aircraft, second only to the U.S. Army's massive fleet of A-60 Black Hawks. For some time, it seemed as though the A-12 Avenger II program was going off without a hitch, but then, seemingly without warning, it was cancelled by Defense Secretary Dick Cheney in January of 1991. For some time, the A-12 Avenger II program seemed to be progressing smoothly, and Cheney had repeatedly reported as such when pressed about the program by Congress. The truth is, as far as Cheney knew, the program did seem to be going smoothly, as officials within the Navy, the Pentagon, and both McDonnell Douglas and General Dynamics all seemed intent on sugar-coating the program's woes. In the years that followed, the United States government and the A-12 Avenger II's contractors, McDonnell Douglas and General Dynamics, would go through repeated litigation over breach of contract, eventually reaching as high as the Supreme Court. In January of 2014, Boeing, which had absorbed McDonnell Douglas, and General Dynamics agreed to repay the government $200 million each for failing to meet the requirements of the initial contract.